Good afternoon, everyone. And I'm going to try and say this in Malay now. Selamat tinggal hari. Forgive me if that's not pronounced correctly. I'm Nina Isles, and I'm delighted to be chairing this panel discussion. I'm head of EdTech at BESA. BESA stands for the British Educational Suppliers Association. I'm joined today by panelists who specialise in supporting schools, teachers and students around the world, day in, day out. And I don't think I can remember a time when we needed that support from each other more. This year, school leaders and teachers have been expected to go above and beyond, stretched to their very limits. They've delivered remote education during COVID-19, the pandemic, while schools were closed, and many have now returned to the classrooms months later to not only teach, but to assess where and how much learning has been lost during the time away from the classroom, all the while assuring their students that they are not alone in the process of catching up. During the school closures, education ministers in many countries aided the delivery of teaching and learning outside of the classroom, some providing education platforms to help create a sense of community and to bridge the learning and teaching gaps. Some shared lists of specialist supplier resources available to support the process of remote teaching and learning. Industry itself was quick to respond, helping to ensure teachers receive seamless access to their solutions and, where it was needed, ongoing access to online training to help them get the most out of the products, platforms and software they were using. But today, we're looking at the current climate. What does normal look like right now? During this discussion, we'll be exploring some of the methods and solutions we've seen school leaders implementing to support their teachers and students and their parents in uncertain times. Our panelists will share their experiences working with teachers who are identifying, addressing current learning wellbeing priorities, all the while doing their best to prepare for future challenges. We hope to shine a light on some of the unexpected positives born from the crisis too, and to strengthen the dialogue between industry and the wider education system. We welcome your questions after the event, and we will let you know how to get in contact with us should you wish to do so. That's enough from me for now. So I'm going to ask our panelists in turn to introduce themselves and say who they are, what they do, and which company they're from. So Claire, if we start with you.
Sure. I'm Claire Wood, and I wear two hats. I'm Professor of Psychology at Nottingham Trent University in the UK, but I'm also here representing Rising Stars Assessment, because we've been working on a wellbeing resource for schools, and that's called the Wellbeing and Attitudes to Learning Surveying Strategies, and that's for primary age children.
Thank you, Claire. Kira?
Hello, my name is Kira O'Sullivan. I work at a company called Sentry Tech, which is an AI tech company. So we look at how artificial intelligence can support personalised learning for primary through to secondary school students.
Thank you. Alistair.
Hi there, thanks Nina. My name's Alistair and I work with Just to Easy as a content creativity platform for children from K through 12. And we provide tools for students to learn across the curriculum and present their learning in a variety of ways as creative as we can possibly encourage them to do so, embracing a wide variety of technologies whilst doing that. And I've been working with schools, governments in primary and secondary higher education for, I've just totaled up the last 15 to 20 years. So that's a depressing fact for the morning from myself.
Well done. It proves that once you work in this sector, it's very rare that we leave.
There's no
Jessica.
Hi, hello, I'm Jessica Watson and I'm an international consultant at GL Education. I've been at GL for just under 3 years now, and prior to that, I was a teacher myself. I used to teach mathematics in inner city London schools. At GL, my work involves supporting teachers all over the world with understanding the assessments and the data in the assessments that we provide our schools with. We've got a number of different assessments, from our cognitive abilities test through to attainment testing, and also our attitudinal survey PASS, which gives insights into student mindsets and attitudes towards themselves as learners, and also towards the school environment. So that's what I do on a day-to-day basis, provide a lot of consultative support and developing training so schools can utilise the data at all levels throughout the school.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, so let's kick off, and the title of the session today is Identifying Learning and Wellbeing Priorities in the Current Climate. So I think it might be a good place to start if I ask each of you in turn about the top learning priority currently faced by the teachers and schools that you each are working with, and how your respective companies are helping them to address these priorities. So Alistair, if we start with you.
That's a really tricky one to pick your top one, isn't it? That teachers need. The immediate, well, okay, so if I'm going to just take from a story from a school in London, our software is used by all schools there. A lot of teachers rang in and spoke to me directly, and I was very interested to hear what their thoughts were. Their top learning priorities was to pretty much continue as normal as they possibly could, to be able to find ways that they could do what they were doing, to be able to support their children. And one of the questions was, can we use your technology to deliver lessons over the web? And that's not what we do. And we swiftly worked out that the opportunity to flip that whole thing on its head, I won't go down the whole flipped classroom thingy, but the way that teachers needed to ensure that children could learn and grow and progress without being taught via a webcam constantly was something that we needed to address for teachers.
Kira, if I come to you next.
Yeah, of course. It's a huge question, like Alistair said. I'm a former primary school teacher and an SEN teacher. And I just think of what it would have been like in September when you went back, and almost that feeling of where do I start? Because it's been such a challenging few months, and you'll have had children that will have accessed online learning and have had lots of parental support at home. And then you'll have children, and I've taught children like that won't have accessed anything. So it's trying to find that ground again and picking up in some senses where you left off. And I think for me, why I joined Century Tech, I'm quite new to the company. I joined just in January to work with their international schools. And because our AI platform uses artificial intelligence, because it can identify those gaps in learning, I think now the platform is in such a great place to be able to support schools who are looking to do that. So as well as teachers, of course, being able to do their own work and their own due diligence and look and see where do I need to start with students. It's the AI that can really support them in doing that, because it will find those learning gaps. It will recommend them to the children, and then that data can feed back to teachers, and I can utilize that data in front of me and think, okay, I'm going to go back over this area of the curriculum and I'm going to move on in such a way. So I think in terms of our technology and the growth we've seen even the past couple of months, we opened up free access for schools while they were shut, and we reached 45 countries across the world, and thousands of learners were on the platform, which was fantastic. And I think now, AI has really come into the education sector and how it can really support teaching and learning. It's key.
Yeah, it is a massive question, so I apologise. And there is that sense, I imagine, for teachers, like, where on earth do I start? Because every child is going to be different and will have had a different experience during lockdown. And Alistair, you mentioned the need for companies to pivot very quickly in order to meet the needs and requirements of their customers. So we can to some way empathise with the audience that we're serving, I imagine, in terms of having to very quickly adapt and change the way we do things day to day. Claire, if I can come to you next.
Yeah, sure. Obviously, the work that we've been doing has been in response to an ongoing concern that I think was there before the pandemic hit around pupil well-being and supporting pupil well-being, because there was already in the UK an emphasis being put on schools to take more responsibility for pupil well-being at school. So in terms of the priorities, obviously, as the others have alluded to, we're in a situation now where children have had very different personal experiences of homeschooling and of family circumstance. And so what we've been able to do is support schools through the wellbeing tool to, first of all, find out where the children are at in relation to their sense of positivity and optimism, their sense of self-efficacy, their sense of their motivation to learn, whether or not that's been impacted adversely, and also their resilience. Once we've kind of got a sense of where the children are at, what the tool enables schools to identify are children who are particularly vulnerable. Where the schools were using it before the pandemic hit, they can see which children have been particularly impacted by the school closures. But even where schools weren't using it beforehand, what they're able to do is identify children who, either groups of children or entire classes, that look particularly vulnerable with respect to those things that are important because they are linked to students' attainment, and you can't get children engaging with kind of core curriculum subjects if they are still dealing with personal well-being issues and personal trauma issues in some cases. And so what the tool enables us to do is to identify who those children are and to give schools support and ideas and resources for what they can practically do, either at a whole school level, within a classroom, or on a one-to-one level, to support those children and monitor their progress and well-being over time.
Very important points. Thank you, Claire. Jessica.
I echo what has been said. In terms of the schools that we've had contact with at GL, I would say learning gaps is definitely a priority, as well as supporting students get back into, I guess, what we're calling the new normal. In terms of learning gaps, this period of school closures it's not happened before, the extent of it, and so there was no evidence to give teachers guidance on the right tools to use, the right strategies to deploy. So schools have had to respond so quickly to teaching their students in what was primarily face-to-face to all now remote. And I can highly commend the schools for doing that, because they, the schools we've been talking, they've worked so hard and done, some incredible things in supporting their students to continue learning even when the school is shut. And I think that the key now is to identify what worked when they were closed and what strategies that they used, what was successful and what didn't, and to identify the learning gaps, the support needs, so that they can put the strategies and intervention and catch-up programs in place as soon as they get back into school, and prioritize what gaps need to be filled and what specific academic and pastoral support that schools need. Something else that I found interesting recently, which links to what you were saying, Claire, about student wellbeing needs, was that the University of Bristol recently carried out some research into student anxiety levels, and they found that the group of students that they were studying, their anxiety actually decreased during lockdown. And I think what's going to be important and a priority for schools now is to determine how students are when they go back into school. I think there's going to be students that coped well during lockdown, and maybe are a little bit nervous about going back to school and getting back into those usual routines, but also get used to the new rules and regulations, because I imagine school is a little bit different now than it was back at the start of this year. But also there are going to be students that really struggled and are looking forward to getting back to school. So student wellbeing is a key priority for schools that we are talking to, and identifying what pastoral support do their students need on an individual up to a group level, and having that access to that information really, really quickly, so that they can ensure that their students are learning, but also that they're comfortable and happy coming back into school.
Thank you, Jessica. And that's a very important observation to pick up on, this fact that learning wasn't lost for all children. Some children absolutely thrived in sort of the remote environment, remote learning environment. And we can perhaps come back to that point a little bit later. But sticking with the subject of well-being, this flows nicely into the next question, and thinking about the uncertainty that we find ourselves in at the moment, in terms of nobody really knows what next month will look like. Thinking about the possibility of future school closures and the impacts that's going to have on pupil well-being. How important do you think the role of feedback is between the teacher? You know, keeping that ongoing communication between teacher and student. How important is the role of feedback, do you think? Kira, if I start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all know how important it really is. It's critical, whether you're in an education setting and you're delivering that feedback, or like ourselves, you know, providers that are talking to schools on a daily basis. And this is a struggle, because you might be, you know, back in a classroom, but perhaps you're wearing a mask or a visor, and giving feedback. You know, how do we communicate with students? We saw through our smile, through our language, through our, you know, everything. And having a mask on is so difficult to then deliver that same level of feedback and communication to a student. Or you've got your students at home who have lost that human touch, and who are maybe receiving feedback on Google Classroom. It might be a comment on a document or something like that. But again, you've lost that more personal and human touch. So I think it's a huge challenge, and something that teachers have done so well to overcome. I've seen so many inventive ways over the past couple of months. Like, I'm talking to one of our schools, they use one of the features on our platform, which is like video feedback. So instead of just writing something down and leaving a comment there, they'll record themselves giving that personalized feedback back to the student. It then goes on our platform, students click in and they watch their teacher talking to them specifically. So I think it's being creative. It's difficult, it's really challenging, but I think having the right tools in place as well that will help you do that. So again, like on Sentry, you can, if a student answers a question, they'll get instant feedback from the platform. So they'll be told if they got something right or wrong instantly. So they'll know, they'll be able to address that, communicate, you know, that misconception that they might have. And then it supports that dialogue that happens with the teacher as well, most importantly. And looping parents in. Again, you've lost that ability to chat to a parent at the door about their child. That's gone. So how do you have that whole dialogue between student and parent and teacher? It's a real challenge. And yeah, one I don't envy at the moment for teachers. It's really challenging.
Alistair, if I could come to you next.
Yeah, totally echo what Kara's just been saying, how important, ultimately important feedback is. From our perspective, and generally, really, the importance of feedback isn't necessarily just from the teacher. One of the things that's been critically missing over the whole of the lockdown that happened in the UK and everywhere else around the world is that utterly important thing of general social interaction between children. Yes, those that are very lucky and fortunate to play online computer games will these days have a lot of interaction, you know, with their microphones on for Fortnite or Minecraft or something like that when they're interacting, so that they can get that sort of peer interaction. But that doesn't equate to learning. So it's ensuring that there is a connection between what they're actually continuing to learn and also the feedback that can take place there. So what we've been doing is developing a lot of tools for communication that's vital for children to give each other feedback. And that can be on pieces of work that they're working on together. So we can have children working collaboratively on painting a picture or making an animation, or and that in itself can, have some real value for mindfulness and well-being. The opportunity for children to develop you draw a picture about how they feel, and for the teachers to see that. But on a more sort of curriculum base, we provide the opportunity for teachers to provide feedback in a variety of ways, whether that's audio or video, on against a particular piece of work that's been created by the student, or actually within that. And that's a really valuable thing for children to be able to see, and the value that children then hold on to in terms of wow, my teacher, as Chiara was saying, that wow, my teacher is talking to me. That's incredibly beneficial for a child at home who may not necessarily be getting that sort of support within the home.
That's such an important point, because well-being, as we all know, it's not just about the child, it's the entire environment. And if they're trying to continue with their schooling from home, and there may be a situation where there's a lot of noise going on, the parents may be stressed. In many instances, sadly, parents will have lost their jobs. So there's so much more that the teachers have had to take on board.
If I can add to that, to make that even more critically important, is, we work very closely with consortias, one of which is the London Grid for Learning. So also supported through Just Too Easy. One of the things that has sadly been probably used quite a lot is one of the excellent resources from the London Grid for Learning, which is all about bereavement.
Yeah.
There's a hugely vital resource out there. I don't know whether it's available outside the UK. Perhaps if anybody else here does know about that, but it's definitely worth mentioning that those sorts of resources are available online.
Claire, if I might come to you next, please.
Yeah, sure. Just as everyone else has mentioned, feedback is essential in any learning situation. It's absolutely critical when you're in a situation where the teacher-student relationship has been kind of displaced or disrupted, whether it's because you're teaching face-to-face but you've got a mask and PPE in the way, or whether or not you've got a situation where you've got remote learning. And in particular, one of the things that I noticed in our last lockdown was there was a point in the UK when certain year groups were invited to come back to school to get some consistent teaching before they made important transitions within the school system. And what that did is that added a burden on schools, which meant that they could no longer be available to provide online feedback for the rest of the school community who were still homeschooling with their parents. And the impact that had on the children's motivation was significant. It was absolutely devastating. So as soon as the children realised that the teachers weren't logging on, they weren't liking the images of their homework that they were uploading, they weren't commenting on their work. It doesn't matter, you can have the best relationship with your child in the world, but your mum and dad saying, that's great, well done, yes, you got all your answers right, or whatever it might be, is not the same as having your learning validated by your teacher, because children are taught to respect their teacher's opinion of their work. So that is something that has to be facilitated through whatever platform is being used, and the use of video feedback, and that I think is just so important in terms of maintaining that personal contact. The other thing that I would just mention is that issue around feedback being particularly important for children who are engaged, who are about to make or in the process of making transitions. So what I'm thinking of is, obviously we had lockdown, we had our long summer holiday here, and then the children were coming back either to a brand new school or into a school classroom with a new teacher oftentimes. And that continuity of teacher feedback, that sense in which the teachers know where the children are at with their learning, is something that got quite broken this time, I think, and it's something that's really, really important, that whatever platform you use, that the teachers are able to build relationships with the children, but also know where the children are at with their learning journey as well, because school transitions are tricky enough as it is, without a school closure coming right at a critical point in between. And I think we just have to be mindful of those sorts of bigger issues, which, again, from a well-being point of view, those are stressful times for children and families anyway. So you know, that relationship between school, home and child are just so critical at those times.
Jessica, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I follow on from Claire's point there around, you know, that transition and the consistency, I guess, of information from one teacher to the next. I echo everyone else's feedback is so important. It's you know, one of the number one strategies that is effective in ensuring learning and progress. And I don't doubt how hard that has been when you're trying to do that behind a computer screen. Feedback is a two-way process. Teachers can provide feedback to ensure students know whether they've been successful or not, to give them the next steps in learning. But in order for teachers to be able to do that effectively, they need to have an understanding of the students' support needs. They need to know any possible barriers that students have to learning, which could be, you know, it could be a special educational need, it could be a pastoral support issue, it could be they need stretch and challenge. So a teacher really needs to understand the needs of the students so that they can then differentiate the work appropriately, scaffold work, modelling. It's really fundamental in providing very clear feedback for next steps, and providing appropriate support for their students. So I think it kind of follows on from what Claire was saying about teachers, in order to provide good feedback, need to have a real understanding of their students. And I guess what we do at GL is we provide consistent data that we really encourage schools to share, so that it doesn't sit with the senior leadership team or a head of department, but that all teachers have access to that, so they understand any barriers to learning, can have conversations with teachers from the same reports about a student, so that students can get really beneficial and effective feedback, you know, whether the schools are open or not.
And I think we mustn't forget about teacher wellbeing as well, and the importance for teachers to get feedback and sort of clear instruction from their head teachers, especially even now with schools open in the UK. They're operating bubble systems in many schools. So there's I think it was Kira said, you know, school at the moment isn't as we know it, so that it can still feel quite an isolating experience, even though you're back at school in that environment. Which brings me on to the next subject that I'd like to discuss with you, about keeping students engaged and motivated, which possibly is another priority for teachers. What have you seen working well in your worlds to ensure that students don't stop applying themselves, and remembering that some of them are still having to study at home? They might be shielding or have a parent who's shielding, so they're not in their normal learning environments, or coping with the anxieties of catching up. You know, are they feeling overwhelmed? How are teachers managing that whole experience for their students? Sorry, question is, what have you seen being implemented to keep students motivated and engaged during the current climate? I ramble, I'm sorry.
Would you like one of us?
Yeah, sorry, that would help, wouldn't it?
I would say it ties into the previous question about feedback, and for me and for teachers I've spoken to, keeping students engaged and motivated is all about creating an environment for success. So ensuring that you understand the needs of the students, that you are providing them with adequate tasks and activities, and that's what's going to keep them motivated and engaged on task, and get that buy-in, I guess, from the student. They need to feel, even if it's just at the start, that feeling of success and that they can access the learning. Something that we talk about at GL is a term we call fragile learners. And this is where students perceive themselves as being less capable than they are. And it's something that schools can identify through our cognitive abilities test, CAT4, and our PASS survey. We have a number of schools that use the two assessments and triangulate that data to identify these learners. And in fact, we had a recent case study from a school in Malaysia that identified fragile learners in their school. So they identified a number of students that perceived themselves to not be very able when actually they were. And then they also noticed what was really interesting about these students was they were much more likely to have relatively weaker English language skills. So it wasn't that they weren't capable, and it wasn't necessarily what you would class as a typical pastoral issue. It was that they couldn't access the curriculum taught in English. And so it wasn't more maths or more science that they needed. It wasn't necessarily kind of mentoring. It was language support and language learning and embedding that across the curriculum that these students needed. So that's something that we really work with schools on, is identifying those learners, because they typically can be disengaged with the learning, and also they typically underachieve as well, because they have that low self-belief in what they're actually capable of. And a lot of schools that identify these students, they put in place a number of strategies like one-to-one mentoring and encouragement and praise and things like that, so that they can gain that self-belief, and I guess also create that environment for success as well, so that they can actually achieve their potential.
Thank you. Kira.
Yeah, of course. I echo what Jessica said, absolutely, in terms of, the content being right and being engaged with their learning in that aspect. I think there's also a wider piece about school community and being part of something. So actually, if you're sitting at home and you're disengaged and you don't feel like you're a part of your school anymore, maybe you've gone into year 7, you moved to a new secondary. So it's having an identity at the school, and how schools are going to foster that type of community, I think, is key. And internationally, I think I've seen so many schools that have done fantastic things, whether it's a global sports day where they've all, done different activities at home, or they've sang a song together and recorded it over Zoom, or they've all worn the same color on the same day. So the ways that you can foster that community spirit, because otherwise children don't want to learn. If you don't feel like you're a part of something, you have, I don't think, any reason to open that laptop and to engage with your learning. So I think that's fundamental in getting that right. And then when it comes down to learning, that the content is pitched and paced appropriately, that children aren't just being sent reams of work and then expected coming back to feedback, that feedback is given regularly, and that they're engaged in that sense. Something that we look at in Century is neuroscience. So we have an in-house neuroscientist who looks at areas of the brain, so like cognitive load, that the lessons are small and bite-sized and they're achievable, so that children can do them and they have that success, that they're given that instant feedback. I think that's key. That it's not, we've all felt it being on Zoom for hours a day, every day. There is that temptation to sort of switch off. But I think if you get things right, you get that community sense, and then you get learning content, pitched and paced, then I think you're going a long way to getting things right. But it is a challenge, certainly.
Yeah, absolutely. That sense of belonging is so important, and sometimes quite a challenge to sustain. And also, I from a personal point of view, I totally agree with the amount of hours in a day that you can actually perform well in this environment. I call it my flow, and I think after about 4 hours, my creativity will start depleting, and that's when I know I have to go away and do other things like answer emails and things like that. Alistair, if I could come to you next. Engagement, motivation.
Thank you, Nina. I think there's two sides to this. One is, perhaps educator motivation as much as it is student motivation as well. And what I've seen is schools doing a lot of things that the McKinsey report. McKinsey put a really interesting sort of piece quite early on during lockdown, actually, about school-wide priorities in the pandemic. And their recommendations are to, continuously reform the approach to motivation. But what I've seen from schools doing at the moment is some really interesting stuff to keep their staff motivated, regular communication, staff meetings, using a wide variety of different digital forms, but also giving staff sort of different responsibilities as they head into the different stages of lockdown and then opening up, where those that are going into the classroom just focus on the classroom aspects, those that are not going to the classroom because they may be shielding or looking after shielding people, they'll be focusing on the digital side of things. And then if those roles change, people can then be motivated and learn new things as educators as they go through that process. It's important to remember that obviously teachers are reliant on a paycheck, and as is everyone else involved in the education process. And not being motivated by not having a paycheck, as in some cases has been happening in different corners of the world. Which is terribly sad. But in terms of pupil motivation, I think one of the critical things that I've seen is collaboration. For children to be able to showcase what they've been doing digitally, virtually. I'm not talking about getting up on a Zoom, because that's highly uncomfortable for a lot of learners, of holding up a piece of work of what they've been doing. But the simple process of perhaps doing a blog and getting peer feedback on a blog as a piece of work that can be posted for the world to see, or taking responsibility for different parts of the learning. I've seen schools that have given children an opportunity to video themselves. I've got one here I did with my son earlier on, a great book here, Frog Belly Rat Phone, one of my 9-year-old's favorite stories. He read that, and we gave part of that book to another school that was able to then read the next part of the book. So that sort of engagement really raises, amongst young children particularly, some great opportunities for keeping them motivated.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Claire, I know it's difficult to go last, but
that's okay. I think there's a number of things that have been touched on or raised that I would just like to kind of reiterate and perhaps elaborate on a little bit. One is the importance of kind of peer relationships in keeping children motivated, in that sense of school belonging. We know that school belonging is so important to children's motivation and children's engagement with kind of the more academic side of school. And once that sense of school belonging starts to break down, it presents in a number of different tricky ways. So school belonging is something that has to be supported through whatever platform the schools are engaging in. And some of the examples that have been given, I think, are great examples of how schools can use technology to kind of reach out and continue to maintain that sense of having an identity with your school, even when you're not there. The peer relationships are so important. The children's ability to post video blog and share content with their friends when they've been disconnected because of the lockdown has been really, really critical in kind of keeping children engaged, not just with the schoolwork, but in extracurricular activities. We underplay the importance of all of those other activities and that learning that happens on the fringes of school, through whether it's through play or through sharing resources between children or between families or after school clubs. And the children that I've seen being able to use the blog feature of some platforms to show their friends what they've been doing with their mum and dad, what they've been doing in the garden, what they've been making, what they've been learning from that, and to be able to comment on each other's work has been so motivating for the children, because behind the teacher in that, you know, the what your friends think of what you're doing and the extent to which your friends value what you do and what you're learning about is so important. And on that point, just to pick up on Alistair's comment about collaboration, I think this is a really important point. Collaborative learning is really powerful, and it's really hard to do at a distance or in a remote way, but it's something that we need to find ways around, because the one thing we know is that collaborative learning also helps children to develop their all problem solving, their self-regulation, all these sorts of things. And so one of the things that the wellbeing resource that we developed does is it gives schools and it gives children a framework for developing things like how to develop self-regulation, how to develop sort of autonomous learning strategies that are going to help to support children's intrinsic motivation in the longer term, because it's the intrinsic motivation that will keep them going much more than the sort of the more extrinsic reward systems at the end of the day.
Thank you. I want to move on now to talk about education technology and the way in which it's helping teachers to enhance the learning experience during both during the pandemic and at the moment as well. And I realise there's a lot of assumptions around the delivery and use of education technology, and that, you know, it's only any good if the students have good connectivity and they have a device to work with. But are there any habits or use or changes of direction, changes in attitude towards the use of technology that you've seen that you think teachers will take forward? Anything that you've seen, any behaviours that you've seen emerging during this year that you think has broken down barriers and you welcome and you hope will continue? Alistair, if I start with you.
Thanks, Nina. There's one key thing that I've seen being very useful for educators and for children themselves is e-portfolios. Okay. It's sort of the bedrock of ed tech. If you're going to do assessment, if you're going to do collaboration, if you're going to measure where your children are at and where they're going with the learning, all of those things that wrap around the importance of continuation of learning and of a sense of well-being, e-portfolios is at the heart of that. To have a system where teachers can dip into a student's own portfolio and see what it is that they are creating, they have saved from the learning that they've been doing, and then to be able to comment, feedback, and support in a variety of ways, whether that's summative or formative type of feedback. That's the critical thing, because you can also very quickly sense what a lot of teachers have been saying to me is that they can really quickly tell who is engaged, who isn't engaged, and where you know, generally as a whole the class or that year group, that whole cohort is going.
Jessica, I can see you nodding away there. Do you want to continue?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, generally, I think there's been a growing confidence in ed tech, because schools and teachers primarily were kind of chucked in the deep end, weren't they, when this all happened? They weren't able to prepare for this, and so they've had to get to grips with technologies that maybe, you know, they might have used previously, but maybe sporadically and infrequently, and maybe haven't felt that comfortable with it, but they had to do it, and so they sort of did it at times. Or they might have been, it might have been a school-wide platform that had been introduced at the start of this, and they've just had to kind of pick it up and run with it. And because of the number of months they've had to do that, I think there has been a growing confidence from teachers and teaching staff in the use of EdTech and educational technologies. They're getting more comfortable with how to use it and maybe utilizing it, you know, more so than they have done previously, and seeing the benefits of doing that. And I hope a lot of what they're doing as well is reducing their workload, because something I heard, I mean, they work incredibly hard anyway, and I think during lockdown they were working even more hours. So I hope it was taking the, you know, some of the strain away by using some of these, you know, platforms and things like that. In terms of what we're seeing at GL, is that schools are increasingly seeing the importance of the data that we provide them, and they're really keen to get their hands on that as soon as they go back to school, because a lot of our schools miss the testing windows, the assessment window that they usually have in May, June time. And they're realizing that now they're going back, they're going to reset that testing window to the start of the year, so they can have the data and the information they need to plan and move forward. And I think a lot of schools are seeing even more now the importance of that, and how useful what we provide, because our assessments are digital. So we take the heavy lifting out of the marking and the creating the tests and the data entry. We do all of that, and we just provide them with, you know, instantaneous reporting, so the effort and energy can be on the outcome of that data. So that's particularly what we're seeing at GL in response to the closures. But yeah, generally I would say it's a confidence and a sort of feeling a lot more comfortable in whatever they've kind of been given to use.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think personally, I've also really loved seeing teachers feel empowered to enter into dialogue with industry and suppliers, and sort of really further that relationship. Claire, make sure you're not now. You next.
I think that for me, the one thing, like Jessica said, I think teacher confidence has just gone from sort of 0 to goodness knows where in a very short period of time, out of necessity. But it's been really encouraging, both as kind of someone who's interested in seeing educators engage in the benefits of technology, but also as a parent to see the engagement with the full possibilities of what we can do with technology. I think that for me, one of the lasting legacies has been the way that homework is being set and assessed and reviewed, because that's remained online for a lot of the schools that we've got contact with. And that what that's done is that's kind of opening up a range of creative approaches to what is being set as homework, rather than the more traditional read this much, do learn your spellings, here's your spelling list, here's this, here's that. And to see that sort of blossoming of creativity in terms of the range of different approaches that are going to suit some children who may have been a little bit excluded or found some of the more traditional approaches a little bit more challenging, that's been quite encouraging to see. And also that sense that more than just the form teacher is now seeing the children's work, the fact that lots of different members of staff involved in the children's learning can dip into the children's homework portfolio and comment on it and review it, and also look at the children's extracurricular activities that are being posted on the sort of shared blog. I think that's been really encouraging, and I'm hoping that's something that's going to kind of continue, because it's starting to bloom and blossom right now.
Yeah. Kira.
Yeah, I think I echo what everyone else has said before me. I think for me, what it is I guess before schools were maybe thinking, should I be using technology? What should I be using? I think now we are using technology, and we need to be, and why? It's looking at the why. What tech are we using with the children? How is it really benefiting them? Because even when I think back to when I was teaching, which isn't that long ago, I sometimes just used technology because it was timetabled. So it was my computer slot that I took the kids down and used the computers. I didn't really think about the difference that would make to them in that time. And now we need to be thinking about, so what are we putting our children on, and why, and what difference is it going to make? Because I guess in one sense, the elephant in the room is screen time. We're all, it's been talked about all the time at the moment. We all work with ed tech companies. Of course, we want children to be using technology, but we have to think, what's it doing to augment the teaching and learning that's happening, so that the time is used so efficiently that we don't have children sitting on screens. We want them engaged in their learning. We want them, communicating in dialogue with face-to-face ideally, but if they are on computers, that the time is used really well to assess where they're at and move them forward, which is key.
Yeah, I think I speak on behalf of all of us when I say that teachers around the world have to be applauded, because they've really done phenomenal work in their response to teaching during COVID, and so many of them have taken that care and support for their students beyond the classroom. But speaking from my role at BESA, I've also been incredibly proud of the way the companies that we represent and support have stepped up to help teaching community as well. I personally know of some people that have just, I think as an industry, possibly have never been busier, and people are working very, very long hours in order to ensure that access is maintained. And that, Claire, you mentioned that teachers are now, fully appreciating all of the possibilities of the technology available to them, what it can actually do, and getting to personalize the learning experience through clever use and creativity of that tech. So we've got about 11 minutes left, and normally we would be taking live questions from the audience, but I thought we could use this time, if you want to just share with the people watching what your respective companies are doing or have done or have made available to sort of really help support your customers. Jessica, do you want to say a few words about your upcoming conference, for example?
Oh yeah, we've got a global assessment conference, which is going to be virtual, as I think many things are. Usually, part of my role involves going to conferences in different countries and meeting schools, and we haven't had a chance to go and do that. So we've got a conference in November. It's completely free, and we've got a range of speakers from different schools, speaker from COBIS as well. So it's an opportunity for schools to share practice, what they've been doing, generally and in light of 2020. So you can sign up on our website, and it's completely free of charge. We've got it running over, I think, 6 days at different times, because we want to ensure that people can get access wherever you are in the world. There's going to be Q&A sessions and opportunities to network with people from across international schools globally, and just take a chance to reflect on what you're doing and what you want to do moving forward. So yeah, do check that out on our website. It's really exciting. It's something we've been putting together as a chance for us to reconnect with schools as well. And also, as a big part of my role, in fact, is training. So I've developed online training modules for some of our assessments, specifically for classroom teachers over the summer, and also transferring a lot of what we used to do face-to-face in country to online training. So for schools that are interested in or use any of our assessments, we've got a lot of virtual options now, and we'll continue to do so, so that we can reach out to any schools wherever they are, whatever time zone, and however, whether you're open or closed, in the meantime, before we can come out and see you.
Kira, come to you.
Yeah, it's similar as what Jessica said. We're just in the middle of planning lots of different events. So sort of showcase events of schools that have been using Sentry and taking our AI and really seeing where they can go with it at school level. And it's just really interesting to see the different ways that schools have rolled it out. We've one school that recently joined us in Spain who have just, instead of, because I guess the word we're hearing at the moment is overwhelmed, quite a lot of teachers being overwhelmed. So they've taken the platform. They've said to the teachers, don't worry about it. It's just going to go out to the students. The students are going to log in. They're going to get lots of different lessons driven by the AI. And teachers will get taught, trained on how to use it in January. So it's just a really interesting use case of how that school are going to go about learning with AI-driven personalized learning, but without any onus on the teachers. So we're seeing lots of different ways of how it's being implemented at school level, which is really interesting. So yeah, we're looking to put on lots of different showcase events and just talk about best practice. You know, what have you been doing? It's been, you know, such a challenging few months, but schools have really risen and embrace the challenges. Really, I think is what we're seeing, what we all see. So lots of different events like that. And just generally lots of different sessions with schools. Again, I mentioned we're all on Zoom all the time. So we're doing lots of parent sessions at the moment, so supporting parental engagement. So usually we would go out and deliver lots of sort of hands-on training at school level, which we still are doing over Zoom, but now we're doing more engagement with parents. So we'll run parent-specific sessions because lots of the kids are at home learning. So we need them involved, knowing what this is, how they can have those conversations with their child to really support what they're doing on our platform. But yeah, it's really exciting. Lots of Zoom stuff, and unfortunately not a lot of face-to-face events at the moment, but fingers crossed that changes hopefully soon.
I think there's a real strengthening of dialogue and community and relationship building going on, which is great to see, and long may it last. Claire, what's happening?
In terms of what we're doing, like as I mentioned at the beginning, I kind of wear two hats in this sort of world. So I'm very fortunate to have this relationship with Rising Stars and Rising Stars Assessment, because in my other world I'm a reading researcher, so I'm very interested in the attainment side of things as well. So what we're doing at the moment is we're working behind the scenes to use the data that we've got, because wellbeing and attitudes to learning is an online tool, and a lot of our reading and maths assessments are all online. So what I'm able to do is to work with Rising Stars, and we're drilling into that data to do an analysis of that, what we can learn from the periods of lockdown we've just had, and carry on monitoring the situation so that we can really get some accurate learning about what aspects of well-being are absolutely critically linked to children's attainment, and particularly what aspects of children's well-being and attainment are particularly vulnerable when children are in a situation where they're forced to work away from school. So we're about to undertake that piece of work at the moment, and we're very excited by it.
Fantastic, thank you. Alistair.
Thanks, Nina. So Just to Easy is one of the systems that we've all been talking about here, of learning management system coupled with the creativity suite. What we did at the beginning of lockdown, when schools started to close their doors to pupils, was make our platform available to anybody and everybody during the whole period of lockdown. And we're still continuing to offer that for shorter periods of time. So if schools, teachers and parents want to try using easy tools for delivering LMS, they're very welcome to come and use our tools without any sort of cost associated with trying it out. What we did at the beginning was deliver a whole range of resources for teachers to help them upskill in using online tools for teaching and learning across the curriculum, with an expanding volume of videos that will enable teachers, parents and children to really truly understand the nature of what online learning is, and how, you know, some of the ways that they could take part in online learning. We also developed some new tools for being online as well, such as, you know, taking publish or PDFs, for example, like published PDFs, and converting those into editable documents for children to annotate online, which is, you know, small little steps, but quite big game changers for getting easy access to, you know, sort of traditional models of teaching, but transitioning that into a digital sense. And we're going to be continuing to develop a lot more of these tools as we go through, and that is really based on what, well, all of the things that we've done during lockdown and will continue to do. I've been listening to what teachers have been demanding. So we're going to keep our ears very close to the ground as we go forward to hear what teachers are telling us they need for how technology can support them. You know, we're very fortunate in that position that, you know, despite having a large customer base, you know, Welsh Government, London schools, all the schools in Vietnam, schools all over the world, really, we're still able to be agile enough to, you know, very quickly you know, bring new tools to teachers.
Yeah, I think adaptability is one of the things that helps us all stay resilient in these changing times. And we're coming up to the end of our hour. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you. I could easily go on for another hour, but I won't. If people want to send in questions to you, what's the best way for them to reach you? If we just go around the table. So Jessica, how can people get hold of you if they have questions they'd like to send you?
You can look on our website, so that's gleducation.com, and there are contact details on there, or our international address is international@gleducation.com. So if you contact us via that, then we'll get back to you.
Brilliant. Kira?
Yeah, so our website is www.century.tech, or if you just put Century Tech into Google, you'll find our website. We have a whole international site that documents our work across lots of different countries and governments and different organizations. So lots of information there. And then info@century.tech, and then your email will come straight through to the international team, and we'd pick it up there and have a chat with you.
Claire?
Yeah, I guess there's two ways. If you Google for RS Assessment or RS Assessment Wellbeing, you'll find details of the Wellbeing and Attitudes to Learning Assessment and contact details from that point of view. And if you've got a specific question for me, I'm very happy for you to email me. My name is Claire, so that's clare.wood@ntu.ac.uk.
Okay, Alistair.
I think the easiest way for people to get in touch, we'd be very happy to answer questions that anybody has just by emailing us at hello@justtoeasy.com. And I think if you just tap into a Google search, Just Too Easy, you'll find us on Twitter and Facebook, and we'll respond straight away.
Fantastic, thank you. And if anyone wants to get in contact with us at BESA, it's besa@besa.org.uk. That's BESA@.org.uk. And do check out, if you can, our LearnEd online event, which is LearnEd at I've forgotten it. Oh my gosh, it's learned.org.uk. That's it, not an email address. And that's going to be kicking off in the first week of November, and it will showcase how technology is being used by teachers. So we have teacher speakers telling a teacher audience about how they're using technology, why they're using it, what outcomes they're seeing. Right. Thank you ever so much for your time. Panelists, you've been absolutely superb. I've really enjoyed it. To our teacher audience, we all salute you. Keep going, you're not alone. And we respectfully acknowledge that there's been so much more than learning lost during this time. So our thoughts and sympathies are with any of you who have lost loved ones during this awful few months. So I hope to see you again soon. Take good care, and hope you found this discussion useful. Thank you.
Thank you.